I'll tell you something, and maybe it'll sound kind of harsh. If you don't ask for help when you need it the most, it will stop the healing in its tracks and you will revert back to where you are.
I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hotflash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
I just got this little nudge that I should talk to you. And I literally didn't know anything other than I loved your protein powder. And then I liked your newsletter that you send with XO Jacqui. And then I started reading about you today and I was like, oh my gosh, this is one of the most interesting people ever.
That's sweet.
Do you get nudges? Do you pay attention to nudges?
I live everything by nudges. I'm a nudges. I have to be like, no more nudges today. I need a nudge break.
What do they feel like for you? Like, I'm only starting to pay attention to my nudges. I used to ignore them and make them wrong. So what do they feel like?
There's a couple different ways they come about, but one of the strongest ones is I will literally just start to shake. Like as I'm talking, it's like my body is overwhelmed by the energy of the nudge. Almost like you're in church and those people start speaking in tongues. It's like, I'll have to it'll be like, oh my God, you have to do this. Like it has to happen. And I also feel like they come in really subtle. Like somebody might say something in a room and your ears perk up. That's a nudge. Somebody you don't even know. Or you might come across an article. I mean, it's just really about paying attention. And you can't pay it. For me, it's challenging to pay attention when I'm distracted. Like overwhelmed or distracted. So the nudges come when there's space.
Okay.
But I'm responsible for creating the space for the nudge to come in. If that makes sense.
And you just sent out, I get your newsletter from Substack and you just sent out something that I'm going to incorporate on Sundays because you said you used to try to rest. And now you have like a sort of a 2-hour business meeting with yourself to set yourself up for the week. Does that help you create that kind of space?
Yeah. I mean, how many mornings did I allow myself to wake up on Monday in a panic before I gave myself permission to take care of myself on Sunday? And oftentimes, like the big changes in our life come when we go against what we consider or we've decided is the cultural norm. Like it's not okay to do this on Sunday. You can't work on Sunday. It's like, no, I'm working on Sunday because I want Monday and the rest of the week to have some tranquility and balance. So just those 2 hours on Sunday, like change everything. And my family now knows like 3 to 5, I'm taking that 2-hour window. And notice like Sunday, in at least where I live in California, Sunday afternoons are kind of like that downtime. Like, you know, you've maybe gone to brunch or done your exercise for the day. And it's like maybe nap time or, I don't know, read a book time. Or for me, it's take care of myself so the rest of the week can be more spacious than it would be without it.
I feel like when you do this, you could stave off that Sunday night feeling because you're just getting organized. You're putting everything first. You're creating order. And I think so it's Monday mornings and Sunday nights. And then you can go do something fun.
Yeah, that teacher I was talking about, that article, he just said subtly once during a lecture that he was giving, like, the day starts the night before. And I was like, it really rang true for me, but you have to set the stage for that next day in advance. You know, it's like the reverse hangover. It's like right? I don't want to call it a hang up because that's got a different meaning. But you know what I mean? Like 2 hours, 120 minutes, you know, 2 episodes of your favorite TV show, and you can make your whole week better because it sets up everything. Because, you know, one of the things I talk about in that is like do a brain dump, like just almost like morning pages. If anyone's ever done morning pages, do a brain dump. Give yourself 5 minutes to just write the most ridiculous to-do list you've ever seen in your life, and then go back in and edit it like you're editing somebody else's life. Oh, she doesn't need to do that tomorrow. She can do that next week. There's no reason why she needs to, clean out her sock drawer tomorrow morning, because the overwhelm creates more on the list in your brain. So where maybe you have 10 things to do, your brain has, because we tend to, our human brains tend to go toward the negative naturally. It's like those 10 things become 275 things you have to do. So if you write down all the minutia that you've created in your brain, you'll find out that maybe there's 5 things that you really have to do on Monday. So you can have Sunday night dinner with your love and your family and your friends and like feel some joy. You're not like, oh boy, tomorrow. Oh, oof. Oh.
I have no idea what I have to do.
And then it becomes, I can't exercise tomorrow. I don't have time. And who loses out on the I don't have time language? You do, because you spend the whole day tackling this unknown to-do list, and the last person that gets taken care of is you. And then that just moves through the whole week.
I feel like what you're talking about is, it's me being like the gentle manager of myself. Even your use of the word she doesn't need to do that. And when I'm not being like the gentle, mindful mother manager of myself, I am watching the 2 extra shows because I'm getting away with it in some like weird way, but it's like not adding up to anything. Like it's such a gentle, nice way of like, I've got this. It's going to be better. It's going to be a little bit of short-term work, but I'm not going to be doing this rebellion that hurts me always.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had a t-shirt on right now that said original rebel. It's like in my teen years, it was like, rebel, punk rock rebel. And I feel like you can watch the 2 shows with joy and without guilt, with taking care of yourself a little bit first.
Yeah.
Like basically I'm saying there's nothing wrong with watching 2 shows. Only if it's causing you stress on the back end.
Yeah. Like remove some of that psychic weight.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Sorry, my dog is like compulsively licking himself right now.
Oh.
It's okay, Bumper. It's okay, Bumper. Lay down.
Bumper. That is the best name.
Yeah.
In one of your articles, you sort of talked about how this happened, how you created Exo Jacqui. You are an entrepreneur. I mean, you have Desk Yogi, which is an unbelievable resource. I want to introduce it to the museum where I am. Over here, it just seems like a no-brainer where you have people, and you somewhere you said people have been working so hard and they don't have any time. I'm paraphrasing you badly. They turn into a mashed potato. And I laughed because I always say I turn myself into cardboard. Like that's how it feels, like this feeling of like just lack of movement, that feeling you've been working too hard, that feeling you don't know yourself or what you want. And so anyway, you've done that. You had your own yoga studio. You have done a ton of things. I mean, in and out of being a musician, I guess you're always a musician, but you're back to it. But this Exo Jacqui, because I'm obsessed with your product, you were doing everything right. And I'm making quotes because there's this tone on sort of social media and in wellness that maybe you won't have any menopause problems if you do everything right. And you were doing everything right. You weren't doing anything different, right? You said I was eating the same, working out, lifting weights, eating healthy, not too stressed, right? Yeah. That's the part, except for the weight. So you had 12 pounds of unexpected weight gain.
Yeah.
That happens during this time. So what happened? What happened next?
Well, I've been in the, fitness, wellness world for my whole adult life in different forms, right? In different iterations. And there have always been times where you just lose yourself, regardless of what you're doing, even if you're like super passionate about it, you just kind of lose like that she care, right? That you were just talking about. And And you can be doing everything right, but then something shifts in you, and in most cases it's hormones, and what you're doing isn't working anymore. So it's almost like you're sailing and the wind has shifted and you need to adjust your course. And sometimes you get off course because you don't realize. That's why I call the newsletter On Course. It's like you don't realize that you've gotten off course. And so for me, I was eating healthy. I was working out, and I was, wasn't overly stressed. And I had my morning meditation practice and, girlfriends and, all the things that you would like, oh, these are the things you need to do to be healthy during menopause. And I still packed on 12 pounds. It felt like overnight. It was like, I mean, you think I'm telling a tall tale when I say like I put my tennis skirt on and it didn't fit. Like that's how it felt. It's like, oh, like, wait a second. And I'm sure it crept on slowly, but for me, it was like what, And so I had to like figure it out. And everyone talks about protein. But, protein shakes made me sick. Like didn't taste good, and they made me farty and bloaty, and blood sugar was like, woo, and it just didn't work for me. So the story is true, where I just like called my friend Alexis in desperation. I was like, Alexis, can you help me? And she was like, she's younger. She's about, I think, 10 years younger than me. So not in menopause yet, but, her family struggled with allergies. So I just figured she could find something for me. And she made me this mix. And it was just like, oh my God, this is what I needed.
And I don't think a lot of people realize, like, I've loved smoothies my whole life, right? Like when smoothies first came out, I was like, this is amazing. And I made them, and then protein powder came out. And, I don't think people realize what's going on with protein powder. Can you sort of speak to that? Like, why do you think that those protein powders were making you feel that way? What ingredients?
There's a couple different things. I feel that one of the beautiful things about perimenopause and menopause is that you're just more sensitive. Your system is more sensitive. You're emotionally more open and sensitive, energetically coming into a phase of like complete queendom and wisdom. And that transition has a part of it that is being incredibly intuitive and sensitive, and your body is sensitive. And so maybe in your 20s and 30s, you could drink a protein shake with 75 ingredients and tons of vitamins and minerals. And we're going to put this in it. And you're going to need this, 10,000 milligrams of vitamin D. And we're going to add all these things. And you read the ingredient list, and yeah, they're all great ingredients, but there's like 80 of them. Or the protein powder is like packed. It's got like pea protein, whey protein, it's got like 10 different blends of protein. And for me, it just overwhelmed my system. So, and then the ones that I went with, it's like, oh, that's just too much. Then it just had tons of sugar or natural raspberry flavor or, something in it that aggravated my system. So I was like, all right, Alexis, I just want protein, like the cleanest protein. She's like, well, brown rice protein keeps you full longer. It has tons of fiber so you can poop, which is, people don't like to talk about it, but it's important to have that experience on the daily, and it'll be clean and it won't because I was having a lot of issues with my blood sugar, like, up and down blood sugar. It'll like stabilize your blood sugar. So she made me a mix with brown rice and a few of the other ingredients that are in our mix now, but just 6 ingredients. And it just felt simple. And if I had if somebody came to me today and she was like, oh my God, I'm in menopause and you just simplify. Just where can you simplify? And for me, the protein shake had to be simple. And then I went away last year. I gave myself the gift of going to a longevity retreat for a week. And in all my years of education, I had never had a nutritionist tell me, and I've studied nutrition and have some certificate somewhere in here about how I'm a nutritionist and I'm a raw food chef and all these crazy things I've done. No one ever told me that your body can't digest more than 30 grams of protein in an hour. So that's why our protein powder has 15 grams of protein, because by the time you put a little nut milk in there, and, if you put yogurt in there, it's like if you get up toward more than 25, for me, 24 grams of protein or more in one meal, your body just gets, for me, my body just gets a little overwhelmed. And I feel like if you've ever had a history of Epstein-Barr or chronic fatigue or leaky gut or irritable bowel or any kind of issue in that range, you're actually, even if you've healed or gone through that, you're actually just a little bit more sensitive during menopause. Sensitivity is a blessing.
The way you're reframing the sensitivity is beautiful. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. I feel like I want to have a little tear because no one talks about it like that. Everyone talks about it like it's a bad thing.
Oh, it should be a rite of passage number 2. Like, the rite of passage when you start menstruation is like, it should be a rite of passage on the other side of that.
Okay, so I was going to ask you what your physical menopause has been like, where you're at with it. Where are you in that transition and how are you feeling?
I turned 56 in May, and so I am officially through that 1 year mark of no menstruation, and I feel, I wrote about this the other day on a different blog about how I still feel highly influenced by the moon. Like, I still have a relationship with the moon that's kind of reminiscent of my menstrual cycle. Like the last full moon, I was like, ooh. But I feel
it was a biggie.
I feel stable in a different way. It's hard to put words to it. It's like, how people, like, you'll hear, like, there'll be memes on social media, like I don't care what people think about me anymore, because I'm, or I don't care about, I don't put as much weight on those things that I used to put on, but it's just if you allow it, because you have to allow it, if you allow it, you can feel a new level of grounding into life, like solidity in life. Growing up, when I was a little kid, my mom was like, you have to be a ballerina. You have to be a ballerina. I was like 3. I was going to these ballet classes, and I had this French ballet teacher named Madame Perrier. And she told my mom, like, on week 3, like, she'll never be a ballerina. She's too stocky. Never. And this was like 1971. And my mom told that story as a horror, like, for like 10 years. So it became like ingrained in my brain. And it was a barrier for a long time. Like, I can't do that because I'm, don't have the right build or stocky. And then, now, 52 years later, it's like, that stockiness allows some real grounding into the earth, right? Like, you can really be here in postmenopause if you do your Sunday afternoon 2-hour session.
Have you found yourself, like, you sound like you have a beautiful energy. I can just feel it, but you sound like you've paid more attention to this side of things, but have you found yourself becoming more intuitive, or have you found yourself becoming more aware of another world, other energies, anything like that?
Such a great question. I don't know how much of how deep back in my story did you go?
Well, it's hard when you just look at someone on the internet, but tell me a little bit about yourself.
I had a drug problem in my early 20s. I was living in New York. I was in a band. I had a major drug problem for years. It involved heroin. It involved Valium. It involved any drug I could get into my system. And it's frankly a miracle that I'm alive. And I can feel it in my body just now when I bring it up. Like, I can feel it. that feeling that I had. I was walking down the street. I remember I was wearing black Levi's, black boots, black top, like dressed all in black, carrying my purse, high as a kite. I just left a bar. I used to work at a restaurant, like a 5-star restaurant with famous people. And I lived like 6 blocks away, but it would take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to work because I would stop in a diagonal at each bar along the way and have a shot of vodka. I mean, it was a miracle that I was walking, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm actually I'm actually de-escalating the severity of what was happening. And I was walking down the street. I had just seen my friend. I'll just never forget his name or his face. I had like 3 drinks at his bar. I walk out, I'm walking down the street, and it was like a movie. I was like stopped in my tracks, like shaking, and a voice came into my being that wasn't my voice, wasn't my internal voice that we all recognize. It was like, you are going to die if you don't stop. And it was, we can call it God, we can call it your higher power, we can call it whatever you want to call it, a hallucination. But it's that moment saved my life in that period of time. And it took me, I want to say, a really ugly 2 months to get clean and sober. It was ugly. It was an ugly time.
Horrible.
But I was committed and I did it. And I think I was 24. Otherwise, I'd be dead. Definitely, if I hadn't listened in that moment to that voice and just like kept walking down the street. But I think I went home and called a friend of mine that lived in upstate New York. I was living in New York City, and took a train to her house. I almost actually burned her house down. That's another story. But I got clean. The bottom line is I got clean. And, you know, my wellness, my path to get to here is largely informed by that moment. And so, yes, am I more intuitive? Yes. But that moment allowed that listening to the message in that moment allowed that window to open in my life. So yes, I believe it's a friendly universe. Byron Katie always says it's a friendly universe. And if you can get behind that, even if you're like, you know, in trouble, if you can get behind that's a friendly universe and have that like as a foundational thought in your arsenal, you're in great shape.
Oh, I love that. It's hard though, isn't it?
So hard.
I've been leaning into this more and more and more because I've always had anxiety, and I always had that the other shoe's going to drop sort of fear, right? Like,
oh yeah,
about my health and whatever. And I've been really leaning into this, and really going through menopause is a miracle for a lot of this. But once you see it, then you just start seeing the language like that everyone's using about everything, even about menopause. I saw a headline. It's like, this strikes, you know, like perimenopause strikes. It's like, it doesn't strike. It's not. And I'm in the media, so I've been a big part of this, but
it strikes.
I totally know what you're talking about. It strikes. And you just see it with everything, with finances. That's another thing I've been working on a lot, is getting over my fear of like finances and not having money, and that it's just rampant in that. And so it's a friendly universe. That's so beautiful. You know, I heard that voice once, and it didn't tell me that I was going to die, but I once dislocated both my shoulders.
Oh my God.
In yoga at the same time. And I was in a class, and it was like a stunt class on the helipad between 2 hotel towers here for the launch of like an app, you know, that. So it was like everyone's taking pictures, and the teacher was the worst. I don't have very good emotions towards her because she didn't stop the class. Like, she came over and said, "Oh, you popped your shoulders. Like, why don't you go get some help?" She didn't want to stop the class, and I couldn't talk. I was just, little squeaks were coming out, and my shoulders were like, I look like a, you know, deboned chicken.
Oh my God.
And I heard a voice. Like, I was in puppy, I think, pose. And so I'm sitting on my heels, sitting there just like surrounded by people, but losing it. Right. And I heard a voice that said so calmly, so serenely, so confidently, "You can put them back." Like, That's what I heard. And I did. I took a deep breath and Mel Gibson like hurled them back into place. And then it was a long recovery, but no one believes it. The orthopedic person didn't believe it. And for a long time, I thought it was God or like my mom as an angel or something. And then someone said to me, I was telling them and they said, I think it was you. I think it's the higher part of you. Like, I think so you mentioned that too.
Yeah.
It's something.
Well, you're God, right?
It is something.
You're the God of your own life.
Right. Oh, well, I'm glad you heard that voice. And were you sober?
I was sober for 15 years in the program. And then at 40, I was like, I can drink wine. And, I want to drink wine with my friends and, have that experience, and I deserve it. I've worked so hard to be sober. I deserve to drink. It's like such alcoholic thinking. I just have to laugh because it just cracks me up. And, like the walls didn't come crumbling down, and I started drinking wine, and I didn't like go on a bender, and I didn't like, there's there's just loads of terrible stories about people that are in program that drink again and their lives become shambles. And, that didn't happen for me. So when I share this, I don't want, this, like, it wasn't fun. I had the pretend feeling that I was more part of my group, my friend group, because I was participating and drinking with everyone. But then, a while back, I was like, especially when I hit menopause, I was like, this is poison for my body right now on many levels, like emotionally, physically, like on the physical side, causing a lot of inflammation, sleep. You mentioned, we talked about sleep for a minute earlier. And, when I wasn't like excessively drinking, I would have like a glass of wine with friends or half one of those hard kombuchas, and I would snore. And when I got sober again, I stopped snoring. I slept through the night. I never wake up. I mean, occasionally, but when I go to bed, my eyes open up in the morning. I stopped drinking and I stopped eating sugar. For me, that's what I had to do for me. I believe in my family lineage, there's a long line of alcoholism. And I do believe that for some, there's more of an allergic reaction to alcohol than for others. I believe that alcoholism is an allergic reaction to alcohol in the extreme form that causes a craving. And for me, my body and system runs so much better without it. So I'm sober again now. And it's been such a blessing to my physical health and, as a result, my mental health. I don't, so like it was extreme at 24 and it was very subtle at 54.
You said two things I want to follow up on. One is the pretend feeling of connection. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think a lot of people, when they're finding out in their 40s that alcohol is not working for them, this is a really hard thing to realize and to face. And what's pretend about it?
You're just in a group of people doing something that doesn't work for you. And when you show up somewhere, whether it's a work job with a group of people or a social event, or let's say you're on a tennis team like I am, and you show up as not truly who you are, and you're like doing things that are not in alignment with you, you're not really there. A part of you is there. What do they call it? The mask. This mask has shown up, and it's hard, right? If you have a friend group and you intuitively know, or you've gotten advice from somebody or gone to rehab and you come back into that friend group and you're not suddenly doing something that everybody's doing. So let's say you are, you're in a friend group and you stop drinking. That happened to me on my tennis team. was such an amazing group of ladies. And it's not just the tennis team, but I actually was invited to a friend's birthday weekend out of town. And it can be challenging to be the one that doesn't drink and add not eating sugar on top of it. It's like, woo, Jacqui's here. And so I'll give an example. Last night, I went out to a friend's retirement party at a restaurant for happy hour, and I would say 85-90% of the people were drinking. So for me, I've just learned to take care of myself. I order a drink, but it's like a sparkling water. And I say, can you put some little fruit on that and make it fun, And that's my way. And I can always be the designated driver. I went away to an event with a bunch of friends the other day, and I got to be the designated driver. It was really fun. To find your way to feel at home with the people that you spend time with and being your authentic self, and menopause gives you that gift.
I mean, you can lose friends though. It was in the pandemic and I was with my crew in Dubai drinking champagne and smoking like we always did when we got together. And I had a feeling of like, this isn't fun. Someone said something kind of mean and I just was sitting there going like, I don't want to be here, but I couldn't leave by then. And then I just realized that I don't really hang around any of those people anymore.
Yeah.
And I had to quit drinking for gut issues for about a year, but it was huge because I've always been a binge drinker.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved the sweet feeling of just like necking a couple of drinks and then sort of not thinking too much,
Yeah.
And once you spend months at a time not doing that, it's confronting, but I think it's a bit scary because what I'm saying would scare people, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to be able to be friends with those people, but I still have a lot of the same friends. It's just when alcohol is really important, you not drinking is confronting, I think, for some people.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if you read, I wrote an article about how to clear a room in 60 seconds. It's about being at a party and somebody coming up to you and be like, oh my God, you look great. Like, what are you doing? And you're like, well, I'm not drinking and eating sugar. And so you're like standing in the room by yourself, but people are asking you, it's like, oh, what are you doing for, I'm just telling the truth about that. But on the other hand, if I didn't share that, that's not being my authentic self. And I have to be okay with people leaving the room. It's it's challenging to talk about because there's nothing wrong with drinking and eating sugar if that's what is right for you. But if you're coming to me on the daily saying, I can't sleep, or I don't know why I'm gaining all this weight, or, I can't, my joints and my muscles ache. Like, you need to stop drinking and eating sugar.
Just see how you
feel. Give it a little take the temperature on that. Give yourself 15 days. I busted my knee playing tennis, in the end of 2022, and I had surgery at the beginning of 2023. And 4 months after my surgery, I was in so much pain. And I was like, I cannot do this. And so I was like, I know what to do. I need to stop eating anything that is inflammatory in my body. And that included sugar. And I was better and pain-free in like 10 days.
That's funny that you say 10 days because I had terrible body pain in perimenopause. Terrible. Mm-hmm. And I heard that the Whole30 diet would help. I mean, this is before I was putting really anything together.
Yeah.
And I picked it up in a bookstore and flipped through and it said one of the applications is for body pain. And it was 10 days into that 30 days. And back then that was much harder for me to do. That I woke up and I get used to hurt to roll over in bed. Like my hips hurt so much. And I stood up and it was like magic overnight, but it had been 10 days.
It's a good time because your liver needs to do its thing and your spleen, your adrenals need to do their thing, your bacteria that wants to crave it because it's really, I think, the bacteria in your system, that's like, ooh, we want that. Isn't it time for ice cream? It's 10 p.m. You guys, they'll whisper in your ear like the little ice cream toy on your shoulder. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, isn't it time for that ice cream? It's 10 p.m. You know?
You should have some. It's good. You deserve it. Other people are having ice cream.
Yeah.
For me, it's the cookie. There's this place I can order a cookie. I can order one cookie. Because they have delivery like crazy here. And I can order one of these huge, it's more like a cake. It's a large cookie. Anyway, okay. So, the big buzzword is trauma. Your life, you've had, I would think, a lot of it. You had a difficult relationship with your mom. She was bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds really tough. And you moved and you found out I found this all out from the internet. I feel weird saying it. You found out you were adopted at the time. So, I mean, there are studies that show adverse childhood events can impact your menopause experience. I'm figuring that out. I'm also figuring it out for my journalism career because there were some traumatic things that I saw that I never processed. You've had lots of this stuff happen. So I'm just wondering, how do you feel about this trauma word being thrown around? Have you done any of these somatic practices or breath work things to move this stuff through, talk therapy? How have you sort of dealt with all of the things that have happened in your life so they don't haunt you? Or is that the program? Is that the program? Sorry, is that the program? Is that what you do in the 12-step program?
There's so many things that I've explored. And we could do a whole series of podcasts about them. But I have to say, from the childhood trauma piece, so we just focus on that, I really found neurofeedback to be incredibly, incredibly helpful. And I went away to a retreat, a 5-day executive retreat where we did intensive neurofeedback with a therapist for 5 days. And I think that alone, combined with all of the other adult lifetime of work from 25 on, I went to this retreat, I think I was 52, so 4 years ago. Everything allowed me to be available for that, but neurofeedback is incredible. And I actually think now there's some systems where you can do it at home. I think that's a lot safer than doing ketamine treatments at home that you get, delivered to your house online. I don't advise that. But I feel like neurofeedback is a game changer because it actually rewires that reactive pattern that's grooved into your brain. It's almost like you're going to work and you drive a different way to work. Like where you would always go down road A, you take road B for fun. It's like neurofeedback takes road A and allows road B. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's all.
How does it work though? Like what's an example of how well, in this case, the program I did, you wear headphones and you're listening to sounds and you have some electrodes on your head. And in some cases, in some neurofeedback sessions, you watch a video. So it just depends on what path you take. But for mine, I was in a dark, almost like sensory deprivation pod and had headphones on and they were tracking my brainwaves to see what brainwave pattern I was in. And if you have experienced trauma as a child, you're constantly on am I safe mode. Am I safe? Am I safe? It's like the undercurrent. It's like if you were to take all the sound out of your head, the one that was left was, am I safe? Am I safe? And I feel like the work I did at that point has allowed me to let go of that as my undercurrent mantra. And it's not, it's not like I'm safe. Like, hey, let's go. I never feel unsafe. But it's allowed me to identify and acknowledge, oh, I'm feeling triggered right now because I'm not feeling safe. And all the years of therapy, all the years of talk therapy, all the years of,
this workshop, this breath work, this thing, that thing, this thing, never allowed me to get underneath that, to that core feeling of I'm not safe, in a way where I felt it like on a cellular level. And for me, it was like healed my brain. It was a tough transition to come home from that retreat. I got to tell you, like, I felt like I was walking on rough ocean, but it settled after a while, and I got support, and I asked for support. So anything you do, asking for help is a key ingredient in success. Asking for support and not going it alone. We are not meant to do this alone. Any of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answered your question. I went too big on a tangent.
You totally did.
But
no, I loved it. And when you said ask for support, like when I hear that, what do you mean? How did you do that? Because I don't think people even know how to do that.
I'll give you the direct example. I came home from this retreat. I had a good friend here watching my dogs. My son was away in Germany, and my daughter was away on a summer trip, and I came home, and I knew I could not be by myself. I was not stable after that, the work I had done. And I said to my friend that needed to go back home, I said, I need you to stay. Can you stay? And it's hard to ask. It's hard to ask in the face of a possible rejection when you're feeling fragile. It's hard to ask for help when you're feeling fragile and when you need it the most. And he stayed for a few days, not a love interest, just a good friend. And then he tag team in with another good friend who came after he left. And then I went with her to her house in Colorado, and it took me like a good 3 weeks to stabilize. That's how much healing happened at that 5 days.
I don't think people realize that. I don't think people realize that about healing. I've had sort of those experiences too over the last couple of years. And it's not like the healing happens, but you are. That's the best way to describe it. It's very unstable.
Well, I'll tell you something. And maybe it'll sound kind of harsh. If you don't ask for help when you need it the most, it will stop the healing in its tracks, and you will revert back to where you are. You'll revert back to that behavior. If you don't give yourself the gift of asking for help, and guess what? If you don't give your friend the gift of helping you, right? And my friend was like, thank you for allowing me to be part of your healing. Thank you.
When you're vulnerable like that, that's where your friendship deepens too.
And it's also where you learn who your friends are. Yeah. And it's a courageous thing to ask for help, and it's a courageous thing to help someone. And if you're feeling shaky and you're feeling, asking for help is a great tool and a great thing to practice. You could ask for help on little small things and then grow it to big things.
So you're in the wellness world. Yeah. And one of the things about the wellness world, it's still very much like a transformation based facade, right? Like I was this and now I'm this, and this is my story. And now many, many people who have businesses, it's like their story of how they were this way and now they are this way. Mm-hmm. And the whole conversation I'm having with you is like this, it's little back and forth, it's little up and down, it's a little this, it's a little of that, right? But this narrative that there is a way that you can transform and then stay that way versus the reality of how the healing actually happens. I'm wondering what your take is on that, because I think you're uniquely positioned.
That's such a really, really great question. I will just harken back to GP Rocket, one of my biggest mentors in life, is radical acceptance of where you're at is where it's at. Radical accept. You don't have to agree with what's happening in your life, but if you accept it, you will find a level of peace and freedom that you have never experienced before. And life is not a linear path. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm going to go from, my house to the gym and it's going to be the same. I know exactly what that's going to look like because I do it every day. It's like, no, you're going to, I have another teacher that says like, you make a decision and then life happens. And then it just happens. And can you be available for the experience of what's happening? It's like you might, going back a little bit to what we were talking about, you might have slept through the night your whole life and never snored. And then your partner wakes up in the morning and is like, wow, you snored all night long. What's the thing we always say? No, I didn't. I never snore. I wasn't snoring. What are you talking about? You're crazy. And then it maybe happens like 5 or 6 more times. Like, you are snoring now. It's like, no, I'm not. I've never snored. I'm 60 years old and I've never snored in my whole life. You're crazy. You can't say that to me. You're a liar. That's how we meet change. The change that we don't like. We're like, what are you talking about? That's not true. And then like the journey is then maybe, 2 or 3 months later, you're like, oh my God, maybe I am snoring. I heard that recording that he took at 2 a.m. I mean, I thought it was him, but it's the dog, but it's actually me snoring. I mean, that's how we meet it. That's how we meet. Like, why are these jeans not fitting anymore? They must have shrunk in the wash. I mean, remember the story, they used to sew a different size into Oprah's clothes. They would sew like size 8 into her size like 16 pants. There's nothing wrong with being size 16. Uh-huh. What's wrong is having the illusion that you're a size 8. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't even remember what it is anymore. But it's like there's no linear path. There's just being present to what's happening in the now. And that's a practice. That takes practice.
Yeah. I was just talking about how the narrative that you still see so often on social media, particularly, is that you change and then it's all better. And then you just keep telling that story over and over. Yeah.
I always like to tell the story of like the magical chin hair. Have you experienced that?
What's the magical chin hair?
So like you go to bed and you wash your face and you like sleep and you wake up in the morning and then there's like suddenly this like chin hair or like a giant eyebrow hair or like a nose hair that's sticking all the way out or like a hairy hair. That's life. How did that happen? It happened. I was sleeping and all of a sudden I've got this like dark, coarse, black hair growing out of my chin. It's like, what was my body doing while I was sleeping?
That's how
it's like, what do you do about that? Well, you pluck the hair. That's what you do. And you just like go on about it. It's like, you never know what's going to come up, but you have to, it's basically kind of like the Sunday 2 hours. It's like, if you don't allow some time to kind of like gather, I like to think of it as like gather, then it's going to come at you by surprise. These shifts and changes, menopause symptoms, family happenings. It's just laying a foundation for self-care. And those cheesy sayings, like, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be available to take care of anybody else. It's like, you have to love yourself first. It's, I mean, there's a million of them, right? It's like, how many times have we made fun of those statements? I love Mel Robbins. She's like, give yourself a high five in the mirror every morning. Like, come on, you got it. Powerful practice.
Yeah, that's worked for me.
It's a great practice.
Not the high five, but talking myself up has worked. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that really, because I didn't used to realize I had such a negative voice in my head. I think if people haven't stopped to think about it, they probably don't realize the negative tape that's running. And you do need to just counter it with some other noise. It's helped me.
Yeah.
Okay. To wrap up, what is something that you could offer to someone who's feels like they're floundering in perimenopause and maybe like it's going to last forever?
As much as you can, stay in the present moment. So first of all, if you can change the languaging around forever and you can go back into your life and see, has anything ever lasted forever? I don't think that's possible. And, if you have the access, and not everybody does. So when I say this, I want to say that not everybody has the access to get blood work done. at a cost-effective rate, especially in the US. But if you can get blood work done and go to your doctor and really just see where you're at, if you're really struggling with symptoms, that's a great place to start. Another option is to try not eating sugar for 10 days. Try not drinking for 10 days. It doesn't have to be, again, I would stay away from the word forever. The first tip is stay away from the word forever. And I would always love to tell people that come to me, it's like, if you can change forever into curiosity, you're going to win, whatever winning means for you. Like, oh, I wonder why when I eat that, I fart for 15 hours. Like, oops, guess I'm not eating garlic anymore. It's like, oh, that's funny. I stayed up till 1 a.m. reading and now I can't think today. Huh, maybe I need to experiment with a different bedtime.
Yeah.
Just things like that. Like if nothing else occurs, if you can just change that feeling of forever to curiosity, I think it's going to go a long way. I don't know if that makes sense, but curiosity is a blessing.
Yeah. To be curious.
Mm-hmm.
I give people who don't seem curious quite a wide berth. I've learned to do that one thing. And you just reminded me, that line, I think it's a Walt Whitman poem, like you contain multitudes, like you truly do seem like that kind of person to me. We all are. But you turn back to music. What other things creatively have sort of sprung up for you as you've moved through this?
Watercoloring. I went through a big watercoloring phase recently. It was short-lived, but everyone got a postcard, a watercolor postcard. And I find entrepreneurship to be very creative. So I love it. And I feel like parenting a 17-year-old requires creativity. So that's where I'm putting a lot of my creative energy these days. Especially in this culture, in this life, to stay curious about how to raise my children has been a journey too. That's a whole nother podcast. But I feel like staying curious, being smart about how you experiment with your own health. Like I wouldn't order meds online. Like don't order hormone replacement therapy online without a doctor and blood work. Just don't do it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with hormone replacement therapy, but I'm saying like being able to order ketamine and being able to do these crazy things online and just get a package if you have the right money in the mail every month. I don't think that that's a good choice. So smart and curious. Those are my two things. Smart, curious, and forgiving to yourself.
Smart, curious, and forgiving. And since you're such an entrepreneurial spirit, what do you think in this perimenopause, menopause realm, when they talk about the gold rush and whatever, what would you like to see that you don't see in terms of products?
What would I like to see? That is a really good question. There's so much out there now. I mean, there's great skincare for older skin or, perimenopause, menopause. I would like to see, this is the one thing that I would like to see, and this is actually a project I'm working on right now. I would like to see the conversation begin around post-menopause, which I'm in now, where you're just not considered old. It's like perimenopause has a lot of love right now. Menopause has a lot of love. Post-menopause, not so much. Like what are you post-menopause? You need different things at post-menopause than you do perimenopause. So I would like to see some love for the post-menopause ladies. Basically, that's just old ladies. And, what would that look like? I think, again, if we accept the present moment as what is and are curious about what's happening, we'll notice all the subtle shifts that happen in our bodies and be able to address them. But I would like to see a big movement toward less sugar in our lives. I think that's the biggest transformation I've had personally, is to let go or reduce sugar to next to nothing. And that's tough.
Yeah.
In the US.
It's very tough.
In the US, it's tough. I believe there's less sugar in Europe in packaged foods than in the US, but it's pretty rampant here.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff in the food.
Yeah.
In the US.
Does that answer your question? Or I always like, am I really answering the question? I just went off on a little tangent.
No, I like tangents. Well, it's wonderful to speak with you, and I love what you're doing. And thank you for your protein powder.
Yeah.
And I'm just about to order some. I'm very excited. If anyone wants to try it, we have a discount code too that I'm going to put in the podcast notes.
If you have a sweet tooth, I just want to say, like, we have a product called Your Sweet. It's actually an organic, all natural sweetener. And it really is great to wean yourself off. Like we say in our marketing, we hope you just order it one time. Because it's a bridge. Right. It's like a gateway to sugar-free. And there's no aftertaste. It doesn't spike your blood sugar. It's got 2 ingredients. You just put a little bit in your smoothie, your coffee, your tea. And then eventually, hopefully, you're like not doing Splenda, stevia, or sugar in your smoothies and your beverages and your baking. So that's our hope. It's a bridge.
Well, that does happen though. You know, like no one can imagine who's got a diet full of sugar. It just seems like torture to not eat it. But honestly, when you do come off of it and then you start eating it again, it is almost too much. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with salty processed restaurant food, you know? Like I remember I was in a restaurant in the US and I had one of those like hot artichoke dips that are so delicious, but it's just like, whoa, like the salt, you know, if you're not used to eating like that kind of food. So it really, it can't happen all at once.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of change, right?
Yeah. I just want to say one more thing. And it's when I talk about like putting on 12 pounds and losing weight, you know, I'm not talking about like looking a certain way or looking skinnier. It's like, but each individual knows like when they feel at home and healthy in their bodies. And that might not be like a magazine picture of what a woman looks like. Everybody's different. And so I always like to say, like, I imprinted where I feel great in my body at this certain weight. Is it the right weight on a chart? No. Is it, you know, everybody's going to find their own homeostasis. My tennis coach, Jim Casser, always says, you find your own homeostasis. It's like, where do you fit? And it's that thing about being curious. So when I talk about weight loss, I don't want people to think like that it has to be this certain chart thing that you're doing. You know, it's just what is healthy for you.
Yeah. And as we know, like when you said your blood sugar was all over the place, what is helpful when you get the blood work is that we may not realize that we were, as I was, in insulin resistance and pre-diabetic. And you know, that was another thing that someone said to me, you probably have that. And I was like, no, that's a big, you have to get over some big denial for that. But perimenopause is such a time of vulnerability for that.
Yeah.
So,
that's
a chance that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting the blood sugar is a big shift and cholesterol. Those can all be elevated during perimenopause and menopause as our hormone shifts. The means to get blood work done, I highly recommend it.
Hotflash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hotflash Inc. Media.